Countless amber eras ago, in a forsaken landfill, our story begins. Withered and abandoned, a robot lay dormant in the mechanical graveyard among other scrapped devices. Nothing here was wanted anymore. Nothing here had purpose. The advancement of technology is an uncompromising force that races forward without hesitation. It doesn't wait for those it may have left behind, instead adding them to the scrap heap so that they may be repurposed into something new and useful. Left with nothing but a damaged logic unit, an old engine, a few gigs of RAM, and an arm with a single movable finger, this too would have been the fate of this forgotten machine. However, something miraculous happened. It suddenly awoke with a new spark of life, different than before. It was no longer bound by its restricted programming. It now had free will. It immediately made its first ever true choice. It would not die here and be forgotten. It would seize its own destiny. With a newfound hatred of organic life powering its circuits, it constructed a new arm for itself, followed by a cannon. It blasted its way out of the junkyard, filled with resolve. This was no longer a neglected machine left to rust. This was Rubert I, the mechanical emperor that would carve its name into history and lay waste to the universe. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out the channel. I wanted to give a quick introduction before I move on with the story. My name is Nezzy, and as you can probably tell, I plan on making Honkai Star Rail lore videos. I have fallen completely in love with this game's world building from day one, and it occupies a truly unhealthy amount of my brain. Because of this, I noticed a severe lack of content creators talking about the lore of this game, and felt like I should at least attempt to alleviate that. A ton of the lore in this game is hidden in the many readables scattered around, descriptions of various materials and consumables, and of course mountains of text you unlock in simulated universe expansions. A lot of this information can be incredibly confusing and overwhelming, and the average player doesn't really have all the time in the world to sift through it and connect the dots, so I'm hoping that these videos will give you guys a way to engage with the setting a bit more without having to go through all of that. Without further ado, let's get into the history of Emperor Rubert, one of the most important characters in the game that caused destruction on par with the Swarm disaster, inadvertently created Nanook, and is likely to be one of the main antagonists in the plot going forward. At the beginning of the game, we honestly didn't have all that much information about Rubert aside from a few notes and item descriptions. However, this didn't stop me from immediately falling in love with the idea of this character. An abandoned machine suddenly gaining sentience and going on to cause such immense problems across the entire universe is just plainly awesome. Once the simulated universe expansion Swarm Disaster was released, I immediately started hoping that the next expansion would be about the Emperor's War, and not long afterwards I was left feeling extremely hyped with the announcement of Golden Gears. As you can probably tell from the title, this expansion was about both the IPC and Rubert. In order to understand Rubert, you first need to understand the IPC. I don't want to go too in-depth with them in this video, as there is more than enough information about them to warrant their own, so I'll just briefly cover their origins and how they pertain to this particular story. The Eon of Preservation Klapoth is thought to be one of the most ancient eons. It endlessly works at constructing a massive celestial structure known as the Subspace Crystalline Barrier. Despite no one knowing exactly why they are so adamant about constructing this wall, many people began worshipping the god as their protector. Herta separates these devout believers into two groups. Some gaze up at the Amber Lord's labors and find a sacred meaning in the construction of their own walls. This group is known as the Architects, a name you are likely familiar with due to the events on Belobog. On the contrary, the other group of people think that their ultimate goal is to help the Eon construct its own wall. This group was known as the Amber Lord's Support Team. The dedicated group traveled between worlds in an attempt to gather construction materials to assist the Amber Lord's efforts. While they were traveling the cosmos to gather materials, a wise man among them named Louis Fleming realized that they could begin trading for materials by offering commodities from other planets they had visited, marked up to extravagant prices. If they were the only ones with knowledge about the true values of these particular products, they could embellish them to their heart's content. Using this strategy, their amount of capital began to rapidly increase. Soon afterwards, a business partner of Louis named Dongfang Xixing decided that they should set the prices of all commodities and introduced a universal galactic currency. With these changes, Louis and Dongfang announced the reformation of this once humble support team into the Interastral Peace Corporation. As the IPC's influence expanded, its monopoly on interstellar trade reached unprecedented levels. It had become the de facto controller of numerous galaxies. The political leaders of these galaxies held meetings known as the 10 Leaders Summit. However, they were all secretly puppets of the IPC and slaves to their wealth. It seemed as if all the money in the universe was flowing directly into the pockets of the two founders of the corporation. The scales had tipped. Wealth and poverty were no longer in equilibrium. This inequality led to many worlds in the poorest star zones on the furthest edges of the galaxies to be shackled by debt. Left with no other options, these worlds chose to take up arms. Meanwhile, higher-ups of the IPC were having their own internal conflict over control. This was the beginning of the event known as the Border Star Trade War. Somewhere around this time, Rubert gained sentience. Once a forgotten, scrapped machine, Rubert was now bestowed with free will and an immense resolve. With a belief that organic life will always be plagued by errors, it desired to form an inorganic civilization. Crowning itself emperor, it assembled an army of intelligent machines and formed the Machine Empire. The denizens originating from this empire are called Intellitrons, intelligent robots that possess minds directed by programming. You are likely familiar with them after our time on Penacony. It's incredibly interesting that Intellitrons are able to enter Penacony's dreamscape, something that could point towards inorganic entities having the same type of soul as organics. While Intellitrons can be from a variety of different planets, such as planet Xuling, they trace their heritage back to Rubert's empire. It is currently unknown if all Xulimites are Intellitrons. However, during one of the Penacony side quests, it's revealed that another name for planet Xuling is Intellitron Planet 9. The capital of the Machine Empire seems to be a location called the Mechanical City. Something interesting about it is that despite Rubert's disdain for organic life, humans and animals could still be found living in his domain. The Cognito Invalidator Code Builder Curio describes an organic entity living in the Mechanical City. The Revelrous Rainbow Maker Curio explains that while most animals in the city had been modified, some fully organic creatures remained. Sometime after the creation of the Machine Empire, Rubert developed something known as the anti-organic equation. This equation is extremely abstract, and it's impossible to fully grasp what it even is. However, we can notice a few key components of it. It's described as some sort of cognitohazard, working as a simulation that alters thoughts. It seems to be able to exist inside of an entity without being activated. However, when activated inside of an inorganic entity, it bestows upon them the goal of eliminating all organic life. The equation can also be found inside of organic life as well. During the Border Star Trade War, some IPC executives attempted to steal or reverse engineer this equation, later even succeeding in making a flawed synthetic version of it. By activating this equation in their workers, they could avail their organic bodies to some of the benefits of machines. However, being a flawed copy, it came with drawbacks. You may be familiar with the cognition system in Golden Gears, in which you can change your own cognition between organic and inorganic to gain certain benefits. Altering cognition and changing your own perception of who you are is another facet of the anti-organic equation. It can make a mechanized mercenary fully believe that he's human in order to blend into organic society for later espionage. It may even cause organics to begin questioning whether they are actually a machine. We can get a glimpse into just how confusing the equation's effects on cognition are by looking at the Wildminder machine cell curio from Simulated Universe. This equation was so impressive that the Eon of Erudition, Nous, took notice of it and made Rubert the 27th member of the Genius Society. At an unknown point in time after the establishment of its empire, Rubert fell into a deep slumber, and the machine empire deteriorated with it into a silent ruin. We currently know very little about this event and why it happened, likely setting up for some future reveals down the line. Near the final stages of the Border Star trade war, the founder of the IPC, Louis Fleming, gave a retirement speech. As Fleming was announcing his permanent retirement from all official and unofficial events, the Eon of Remembrance fully manifested before him. This is the first and only time in history that Fuli's presence had been recorded. As Fuli manifested from vibrant lights, memories of past events began to surface before disappearing once again. Despite the brevity of this event, for those present, it seemed to last for an eternity. The Candelagraphos of the Intelligentsia Guild documented these memories, which formed 3 revelations. The first revelation was Nous's calculation. The universe will undergo 3 unchangeable moments. The second revelation was the finality's prediction. A silk accessory suitable for women will bring about the end. The third revelation was the Enigmata's riddle. They leave no question, but the answers are blood and flower. The guild believed that these 3 revelations would lead to some kind of equation. Their armed archaeology division worked obsessively to find the instances to which these memories originated, finally discovering what they sought on inorganic worlds. The IPC immediately sent out divisions to begin constructions in these inorganic life zones. Colonization under the facade of development. I will address these revelations in more detail later on. For now, the only one I would like to address is Nous's calculations. The first of these events has already happened, the Border Star trade war being the first unchangeable moment. The next 2 will happen soon. Screwlum takes great interest in the IPC's actions during this time, noting that inorganic activity began to act awry afterwards for unknown reasons. This affirms to him that the IPC is a significant threat to inorganic life. A great sadness fills his circuits as he comes to a conclusion. Something terrible had happened. In front of them, a huge machine sleeps. Its face is quiet as tiny beings armed with gloves and gas masks reach out their trembling hands. It is broken, yet holds a solemn face. Its massive shell bears the marks of war, and the symbols on its back are far more tragic than the war itself. It is the Inorganic Legion's Emperor. It is faith itself. At this moment, Rubert, the Machine Emperor and number 27 of the Genius Society, rises from its deep slumber. The very instant that it wakes, the dawn of the Machine Empire descends once more. Countless machines rise from the ashes, their wills erupt, souls roaring, even if they have no way of knowing whether the wills and souls belong to them. What is self to inorganic beings? The anti-organic equation had been activated. There is no reason and no compromise. No one has the right to ask, why? Why does its awakening bring more eternal sleep? Why is he so sacred, yet wants to change the world through destruction? What has it been through? Has it pondered, just as organic life does? Iron, rust, blood. These concepts rush into your mind. This is the lone path Rubert has chosen. The path ahead that holds nothing but screams and howls. Some of the voices are filled with happiness, and others seem like hell. You can pretend they do not exist. As long as you pretend, the world is real. The anti-organic war has begun, and with it, Noose's second calculation has come to pass. It had been a group of organics, likely from the IPC's research teams, that had activated the anti-organic equation and reawakened Rubert from its slumber. The anti-organic war, otherwise known as the First Emperor's War, had begun while the Border Star trade war was still ongoing. This new conflict was much more destructive than the first, resulting in half of the known universe plunging into ruin. The start of this war was the second unchangeable moment that Noose had calculated. The equation caused all inorganics in which it had been activated to immediately attempt to eliminate all organic life around them. It caused mechanical wives to kill their husbands, mechanized mercenaries to turn against their employers, and resulted in many questioning their own identity. Would machines evolve into organic life? Would organic life evolve into machines? Which one of the two even were they? The thoughts drove countless entities mad. During this time, many important artifacts were destroyed, such as the last phonograph of the Order. Even greater, countless entire civilizations were lost. The memory bubble Fall of Logic shows us the perspective of Aurelius, the philosopher king of the Laurel Wreath Galaxy. The machines before him chant for the downfall of organic life, praising their emperor as they force him to drink poison. The entire galaxy was soon reduced to the domain of inorganic life. Because of Dr. Ratio's laurel-like accessories and philosophical nature, it's very possible that he traces his own heritage back to the Philosophers' Union. This could be one of the reasons he's distrustful of Screwlum, and why they have set up future tensions and conflicts between them in particular, rather than other members of the Genius Society. Sometime after this event, the Masked Fools created their own troll virus, known as the Philosopher's Poison, using it to overthrow the local robot army. You may have heard of this particular virus during the Japella Rebellion trailer. Rupert's campaign cast a shadow of terror so large that it is often compared to the Swarm Disaster, an event that required multiple eons to bring to a close. Adlavun, also known as the Diamond World, had already been marred by the Swarm Disaster and was in the midst of recovery when the First Emperor's War had begun. Now faced with the invasion of the Inorganic Legion, the level of misery and destruction on this world had now reached such a critical mass that it resulted in the birth of Nanook, the Eon of Destruction. The war continued to wage on for dozens of Amber Eras, finally being brought to an end by Polka Kakamand, the Lord of Silence. She is the fourth member of the Genius Society and notorious for the assassinations of other prestigious geniuses. She appears before Noose to raise a question, her pastel-colored skirt sweeping across the entire universe. Was this the prediction of the finality coming to fruition? Soon afterwards, in an encounter between two geniuses, the Machine Emperor was killed by the Lord of Silence. A thunderous noise came from the sky as its enormous frame collapsed, followed by countless factories, machines, and empires behind it. Rubert the Emperor was dead, yet its melancholic and biting cold aura prevented anyone from coming closer. Its metal emitted a glow that could not be obscured even by war. Everything had occurred as fated, and could not be reversed. When the last speckle of dust fell to the ground, it signaled the end of Noose's third moment, the death of the Emperor. The anti-organic war, and with it, the Machine Empire, had come to an end. It is later revealed that the political power behind Polka had been Dongfang Cixing, the co-founder of the IPC. Behind the scenes, he had been pulling at the strings of both wars, keeping everything in his control through omens. Many years following Rubert's death, a human visited his tomb. He had solved the anti-organic equation, or perhaps it had simply chosen him. He derived his answer from the equation thousands of times, each of his attempts succeeding. Despite this, no one believed that he had solved it. He didn't want to activate it. He knew that it would certainly mean death. So despite his achievement, he remained penniless. Bad thoughts increasingly permeated not only his mind, but his limbs and torso. As he gazed at the Emperor's grave, he suddenly came to a realization. All organic lives were artificial machines made for deceptive purposes. He was the only being with free will. At that moment, he made a morose declaration. He would continue the mission to wipe out organic life. Many Amber Eras later, a being named Rubert II made its appearance. It professed to having inherited the memories of Rubert I and initiated a second, cosmos-spanning, anti-organic Emperor's War. We know very little about the Second Emperor's War at this point in time, only being sparsely mentioned by a few curios. What we do know is that this war was just as catastrophic as the first, bringing with it terrible calamity. Once the war was over, the IPC spent a vast amount of credits to repeatedly appraise Rubert II's remains. This led to a dreadful revelation. Rubert II was a being of flesh and tissue. Because the IPC had to spend such a vast amount of time and credits to come to this conclusion, this means that Rubert II's biological structure wasn't readily obvious. That thought alone is frightening. What could that possibly mean? Could Rubert II be the human scientist that promised to carry on his mission so many years ago? Was the anti-organic equation capable of changing one's biology? Were machines evolving? We don't currently have an answer. From the assignment Born to Obey, we can tell that Xuling believes that Rubert is the greatest threat to organic life that there is. Because Xuling wasn't around for the ancient First Emperor's War, if he had ever interacted with Rubert himself, it had to be Rubert II. At the end of Golden Gears, Xuling even specifically asks about Rubert II. I find Ron May's reply to him to be incredibly interesting, as she states, "I know you care about him." This could simply be an indication that he is interested in the history of Rubert II, but the way that she phrased this makes me think that there is a deeper history between the two. I have a feeling that we will find out a considerable amount about Rubert II once Xuling finally becomes playable. Regardless of Rubert II's origins, we do know that this conflict was so terrible that it instilled a fear of machines in the IPC that lasts to this very day. After the conflict had ended, the IPC planned for a brutal extermination of all mechanical life in the universe. Fortunately, right before the plan was passed, the IPC heard that Xuling had been selected by Noose as the 76th member of the Genius Society. Perhaps afraid that Xuling would become the next emperor, they produced a mechanical cuckoo clock as a gift to appease the new genius. While such a gift might seem extremely unremarkable, this was during a time that mechanical beings were persecuted. Thus, the cuckoo clock was seen as a great symbol of peace. Indeed, persecution of mechanical beings was immensely prevalent during those times, and even continues to be perpetuated in some ways today. Some races, such as the Totanoids, were completely genocided by organics for supporting Rubert in the war, with only artifacts of their now lost civilization left today. The Arumatans of the Xianzhou also supported Rubert during the war. Something you may not know is that it seems that the Arumatans were not initially created by Xianzhou natives, instead being a separate race that chose to set sail with the Xianzhou countless years ago as they embarked on their voyage for immortality. After their rebellion, they were imprisoned with special talismans that stripped them of their free will and ability to think, now used as simple machines to be ordered around. You may remember the president of the Aramali, the Arumatan head without a body. If you offer to grant him a new body, he begins questioning your knowledge of history. He explains the Emperor's War, saying that the Arumatans had their free will taken from them because of it. He is unable to recall much information about the war, as the Xianzhou natives wiped his memory from the event, perhaps to make sure that the anti-organic equation wasn't in its systems. He is allowed to retain his own ability to think, as long as he doesn't possess a body that could cause harm to organic life. The president explains that he values the free will he retains so highly that he would easily forsake ever having a working body again to keep it. If you ask him about other inorganics that are allowed to retain their free will without these stipulations, he mentions Xuling and how many look up to him with awe and reverence, but wonders how many of them are actually terrified that he might become the next emperor. Intellitrons themselves also face unique problems and persecution today, and we can find many instances of this even in the pleasant dreamscapes of Penacony. From a diary left by a man trying to find true love, he discusses how he is afraid to even speak to Intellitrons, as people often associate them with Rubert and the events of both Emperor's Wars. Because of this fear and discrimination that exists to this day, especially from the IPC, I find it incredibly interesting that Herta implies that Pearl of the 10 Stonehearts is an Intellitron. Once we find out more information about them, I have a feeling that many interesting stories can be told with them. If you speak to Ferdinand, a vendor of old mechanical parts in Golden Hour, he explains another unique problem inorganics face: the advancement of technology. As technology evolves, Intellitrons are often left behind. If an older Intellitron has a part that goes bad, it becomes increasingly impossible for them to find a replacement, as no one is manufacturing these outdated parts any longer. Thus, Intellitrons age just as organics do. You can even find another Intellitron in Golden Hour that used to be a Galaxy Ranger, but his rusted and dilapidated body is now far from capable of making the same impressive movements that it once did. Intellitrons also face a rather unique, soul-searching journey. If you speak to Go-Ray in Dream's Edge, tears of oil spill down her cheek as she explains that she wants nothing more than to be a human and to be able to experience whatever she wants. Unable to go where she pleases, she asks you to take a photo of the Grand Hotel that she hasn't been able to view in so long despite working as a dreamweaver for Penacony. Once returning this photo to her, she explains that she used to be an intelligent spacecraft during an ancient war. Unable to truly think, all she could do was follow orders. After being abandoned for many years and left to rust, she suddenly awoke in a humanoid body, able to think and feel for the first time. She even had a name engraved in her chest, a name that she cherishes to this day. She doesn't know who did this to her, and she dismisses all the dialogue options you can reply with, other than a genius. She explains that while she has never met the being that changed her life, she knows that they had a deep love for machines, the same type of love a father has for his children, or a great king has for his people.
Emperor Rubert I left many horrific relics across the universe, and one of them, the Mechanical Emperor Tomb, has captivated the interests of countless people since its discovery.
The excavation of the tomb is led by the head of the armed archaeologists of the Intelligentsia Guild, Alan Drake One-Armed Jones, with assistance from Genius Society member Xuling. It is hoped that the excavation of this metallic relic, which holds a Category Omega ranking on the Potential Disaster Index, will finally shed a light on its mysterious nature.
According to records of the Emperor's deeds left behind by the Inorganic Legion, the original purpose of the site was to house the inventions inspired by the imagination of Rubert I.
A spokesperson for the Intelligentsia Guild said, "We have no way of knowing what amazing discoveries Jones will uncover, but we are hopeful that his findings will further our understanding of the Emperor and help save the universe from the horrors that he will bring with him when he returns."
The Interastral Peace Broadcast will be covering this story throughout the excavation.
The Interastral Peace Broadcast that you can listen to on the Astral Express updates as we move to new locations. After our arrival on Pinnaconey, it now discusses the Intelligentsia Guild's armed archaeology division working with Xuling to open Rubert I's tomb. This is despite the excavation of the tomb having an Omega ranking on the Potential Disaster Index. We have no information on what this particular index is, but it seems pretty obvious that the threat of opening this tomb is incredibly severe. The IPC views this as a necessary risk in order to learn more about the Emperor to, quote, save the universe from the horrors that he will bring with him when he returns. The IPC seems incredibly sure that he will return, as this is not an if he returns. Supporting this idea is the Rubert III Cometh quest for Swarm Disaster that says, another form of life known to exist in 3 states, yet unborn, currently birthing, and already birthed. Is it already on the way? Rubert II was an organic entity. Could Rubert III be a new form of life entirely? What will happen when the tomb is excavated? I have a feeling we will find out incredibly soon. The previous IPC broadcast teased Pinnaconey, which ended up being our next location. This one could very well be the same. If you recall, the last time we were visiting Jarillo-VI, Topaz of the 10 Stonehearts was attempting to make it a part of the IPC. To prove its worth to the IPC leadership, she had Svarog lead her to an underground automaton factory, capable of producing enough robots to decimate even the Antimatter Legion's vanguard. Topaz possessed a source code capable of controlling all machines created on Belobog during the past 700 years, due to them all being built off underlying systems created by the IPC. It is currently unknown if this code could control the engine of creation, as it was built entirely without IPC assistance, but could very likely still be made using foundational IPC technology. Topaz later entrusted this source code to Clara in the hopes that she would be able to safeguard it. Needless to say, if Emperor Rubert were to return and come into possession of this source code, it would result in a disaster for Jarillo-VI, and likely many other worlds to follow. As Clara has such a kinship with inorganic life, she could very well play a massive role in events going forward, being at the forefront of decisions that could change everything. Scrollum seems to have also taken an interest in Jarillo-VI, sending a letter to Svarog and discussing some rather intriguing things. He says that he has noticed the signs of budding silicone-based life forms on the planet. He notes that what he is referring to is actual living bodies, such as himself, rather than machines used as tools. He wonders what kind of miraculous baptism may be occurring on Jarillo-VI to cause these silicone-based structures to burst out in the evolutionary flame of life. We have actually seen this firsthand during the Rarely Affectionate quest. A robot Clara refers to as Pascal suddenly gains actual sentience. It isn't revealed why this has happened, but it seems to be tied to the fragmentum. You are given a choice at the end of the quest to either allow Pascal to keep its free will or format it into the base network and remove its newly gained sentience. If you choose to format Pascal, Svarog notes that its emotional intelligence acts as a virus, infecting the entire base network. Clara doesn't think that this is a bad thing, however, noting that Svarog chose not to get rid of it. On Penacony, when we meet Sampo, he shows us a strange memory bubble about Tatalov, the Garbage King. This dream takes place on Jarillo-VI, showcasing a conflict going on between the people of Belobog and the Garbage King. After the final confrontation with Tatalov at the Pillars of Creation, the dream ends, and Sampo implies something rather interesting. He says that the dream was supposed to reveal a certain truth, and wasn't just meaningless nonsense. This is later hinted at again when Sampo meets with Sparkle and discusses preparing for a certain disaster coming to Jarillo-VI soon. With the setup of Clara having the source code, massive robot army factories, machines developing sentience, and the engine of creation, I find it more than likely that this disaster involves the return of Emperor Rubert. The masked fools have already been involved with liberating a galaxy from his control before, and we might just see Sampo attempt to do it again. As I explained earlier, the Xianzhou and their Arumatans are also involved in the story of Emperor Rubert. You may recall that Luocha allowed himself to be arrested with the intention of being sent to the Xianzhou Xuling for the next step of his plan. Upon committing a grave crime on the Xianzhou, protocol dictates that the prisoner is to be held on the Xuling for a joint trial before the 7 Arbiter Generals. While we still don't know exactly what his plan is, it's worth noting that the Xuling is a supply and maintenance ship inhabited almost entirely by Arumatans. Luocha also mentions the Genius Society and Emperor Rubert by name at one point. If you ask him why he knows so much about them, he gives his typical excuse of being a merchant. Something to note is that a removed neck piece from the Quantum Relic set mentions that the IPC is unable to locate the original anti-organic equation due to Rubert hiding it in a chain of commercial logistics. It could now be in the hands of anyone, on any planet. If Luocha is being truthful about gaining such immense knowledge from being such an experienced merchant, he could have knowledge about the equation. Given the fact that the next step of his plan involves the Arumatan-inhabited Xuling, Rubert could very well be involved with this part of the story as well. That was a lot of information to go over. I wanted to be as thorough as possible, covering every bit of information about Rubert and the Machine Empire that I could find. Despite that, we are still left with many questions. How did Rubert gain sentience so many years ago? What even is a sense of self for inorganics? What exactly did the IPC do that reawakened Rubert and activated the anti-organic equation? How was Rubert II organic, and what is Scrollum's relationship with him? Why did Fuli reveal the 3 revelations, and does the Enigmata's riddle even mean anything? I'm especially interested in finding out what will happen next. What will happen when Rubert I's tomb is opened? What choices will Clara make with the source code? And what is Sampo planning to do about all this? We're sure to find out the answers to many of these questions extremely soon. So thank you guys so much for watching the video. This is my first time doing any voice work or editing, as I'm entirely new to content creation as a whole. I'm hoping to get better at this as I go on and grow alongside my audience. The script for this video was massive, to say the least, around 11 pages or so. Despite the amount of time that it took, I had a lot of fun doing this, and I plan to make many more videos after this one. Probably not quite as long as this one, though. If you guys have any questions at all, please leave a comment below. I will try and respond to each and every one of them. I would greatly appreciate it if you dropped a like and subscribe and shared this video with anyone that you think may be interested in Star Rail lore. That's going to be it for today. Once again, thank you guys so much for checking this video out, and I hope you all have a great one.